Hi guys, welcome to this episode of Legally Brum. This is our spotlight episode for March in celebration of International Women's Day. We are today interviewing Linden Thomas, the incoming president of the Birmingham Law Society. Welcome to Legally Brum.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Okay, so let's get straight into it. What does it mean to be a woman in the legal industry?
That is a really difficult question to start with. In many ways, I think it means exactly the same as it means to be a man in the legal industry. So there's lots of opportunity, there's lots of scope for development, for personal and career satisfaction. I guess the differential comes in that we now have more women than ever before entering the legal profession. In terms of career progression, though, we know there are still some challenges there. So there are fewer women than men who reach partnership, for example. So I would say overall a positive time. We've been in the profession for 100 years, so we're treated as persons now. That's a good thing. But still some challenges to face. The generation of women that are working their way through the profession now are still trailblazing in many respects.
In terms of being a woman in the legal industry, what challenges and stereotypes would you say women face?
There is no one size fits all, and a woman's experience, whether she works in one firm or another firm, will often be very different. So I think that's something to say up front, that I'm speaking generally but not universally. There are more women than men coming into the legal profession. So in the West Midlands last year we had 321 people were admitted to the profession, and 63.9% of them were women. We've got 2,202 partners or equivalents in the region, and only 30.4% of them are women, and only 6.9% of them are black and minority ethnic women. So some people might argue that, well, it hasn't always been the case that as many or more women than men have entered the profession, and so it's just taken a while to filter through the system. But we know actually there's a time lag. There's been a long period of time now where women have been entering the profession in equal numbers to men and still not working their way up. So there's clearly some challenges and some barriers. The Law Society of England and Wales did a survey last year, and they asked people, men and women, what they saw as being some of the biggest barriers or challenges. And one of the things that came up was this idea of unconscious bias. So women being not able to make promotion or not getting certain jobs that they go to, for example, because of unconscious bias, or perhaps not being given certain pieces of work. I know there was a big law firm, not in Birmingham, in London, that did some research around people's unconscious biases. People were given different scenarios of how people behaved in the workplace, and I remember something that really stuck with me was it's 5:30 and a woman gets up from her desk, puts on her coat to go home. What do you think she's going to do? And responses tended, or the majority tended to be, she's going to collect her children, or she's going to do this, something to do with family or domestic life. And then somewhere else in this questionnaire, they'd ask the same question, but with someone that was obviously male in the scenario. The majority of responses were going to a client meeting or a networking event and that kind of thing. Those kind of unconscious assumptions, perhaps still a challenge that some women are facing in their careers now. I think there's also things that are different and challenging as you're female looking to build your networks. And I just remember thinking that my partner, we're both relatively junior lawyers, and he would just be able to kind of, with his male clients or potential clients, have that attitude of, well, I'll just meet you in the pub for a pint, and it didn't matter what the age gap was. It was just easier. There's a way that it's easier and more acceptable for a man to meet with another man and have that kind of relationship. And I think that's quite hard as a woman and a young woman when you're trying to build your networks, and some of your clients might be much older than you, they might be of the opposite sex, they might be the same age and of the opposite sex. And so I think there's work to be done around thinking about how we network with clients, how we train and give young women and young men the skills to be able to build networks, and whether there are alternatives to that, let's go for a pint in the club or play a round of golf kind of culture that still exists, and are other alternatives. So you guys find that as well?
I just feel like if you did that, then just think you're asking them out on a date.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and that's something that young men don't have.
I think women do have to work twice as hard to network. Do you think women have to work twice as hard in general?
There is room for this profession, I think, to do more around flexible working and parental rights and entitlements for men and women. And actually it's in women's interests that firms are just as supportive about men who look to take shared parental leave, take their full paternity rights, apply for flexible working. So, you know, it's not us and them, there's things that we can all do that'll hopefully shift that perception.
So one thing I really dislike in general is that it's acceptable to pull a woman up on what she's wearing or how she's dressed, but for some reason you just don't even think about stuff like that for men.
Yeah, I think that does happen, and I think that, you know, one of those things is there's a bit more of an obvious uniform for men, isn't there, about what they wear and what they wear in the workplace. But I completely agree, and I've had those experiences as well of people commenting on like how you look or what you're wearing, and you think, you can't really say that to me. You wouldn't say that to a male colleague. But I think tied into that's really challenging is how we then, as women, have those conversations, because it's very, very difficult, and it's something I'm conscious of for a young woman, although not necessarily a younger woman, but to say to a partner who has commented on the way that they dress, their choice of attire, whether that's to say, and I know this has happened because people have that I know have had that experience before, you need to look a bit smarter, you need to look a bit sexier, you need to look a bit
I've had that
more like and then so you have this idea that on the one hand, women can be pulled up and told, you know, you need to make more of an effort to look more presentable, or you make too much of an effort, you need to look less presentable. Or where women do have experiences where they're uncomfortable with the way that they've been treated because someone on a work night out has had a few too many drinks and made some inappropriate comments to you, which we know happens. It's still really difficult as a younger or more junior woman to have that conversation and to raise it. You're in quite a vulnerable situation, and I think that things are getting better. People are more prepared to say what they do and don't find acceptable, but actually how can firms be better at enabling those conversations, or being aware, or letting people raise those issues as they happen?
Is there a particular female in your life that has inspired you?
So I've been really fortunate, I think, in that I have had a number of role models, male and female. Generally, I can think of one person in particular who, in my first job after I finished the legal practice course, I had a year where I worked before I started my training contract. The woman that was in charge there was just very genuine. She was, I would say, tough and steely, and you wouldn't cross her. She got things done and knew her job and her work inside and out, and very, very professional. She just had a kindness about her, and I think that's what I would hope to emulate in my profession. And I think whether it's people more junior than you who are male or female, remembering that they're a person too, and they've got experiences, and you can approach them with empathy to try and get them to where they need to be, or where you want them to be. And I think that seems increasingly important to me as I get a bit older, that for women in particular, or although again this isn't exclusive, you have cheerleaders or mentors, people who are more senior than you or have had experiences that compare to those that you've had, and can kind of give you advice, give you guidance, and also encourage you when you need that kind of, I don't know where I'm going next in my career, what do? I know what I don't want to do, but I'm not sure how to get to where I want to go.
I get a lot of Asian girls, especially from a Muslim background, that, you know, wear their headscarf saying, I can't fit into a corporate firm, just look at me. And I think culture and social background, all those things have a big role to play as well.
Absolutely, and that goes, you know, diversity is important, and it's important for many levels. I firmly believe it adds value to your clients, to your practice, that you have. We live in a diverse society, we live in a fantastically diverse city. It's one of my favourite things about living in Birmingham. You know, our profession should reflect that in terms of gender diversity and in other ways.
I was actually talking about this earlier today to a paralegal, and we were saying how sometimes it's more of a class thing than a cultural thing. And if you're from a certain class, you're more likely to get a training contract. Because I think it's less now about what colour you are or what religious background you're from. I think it's literally your class background, and that kind of defines how successful you'll be, particularly in the corporate world. But I think that there shouldn't be so classist. Is that a word?
It can be a word.
We know what you mean.
Because the clients that you work with are going to be from diverse backgrounds. So even if to you, like say if you work for a big massive corporate organisation, the CEO might not be from a diverse background, but all the people you're actually working with there asked.
Have you come across like the ideas of like cultural and social capital before? So it's this idea that we all have these different forms of capital, and they help us in the different environments in which we then find ourselves. And I can reflect really clearly on my own journey and how I've built and developed that. So I can remember I applied for a place at Oxford when I was doing my A-levels, and I went to the interview, and again it could just have been the time that I was there and the people I happened to sit with at dinner, but I was so intimidated. They were all talking about these very professional roles that their parents had, and they just had this level of confidence and comfort that I just hadn't really experienced and didn't really come from that background. Sometimes you don't know the rules of the game if you've never been in that environment, and there's certain ways about the legal profession that we're expected to dress and to behave, and it becomes like this latent knowledge that we all pick up once we're in and we know what's expected of us. And I can actually track over my career how I've built that social and cultural capital and how it's become easier for me in different environments. So I talked a bit about the job that I did for a year before I started my training contract. It was like the best thing I'd ever done, because it was a year working in a marketing position, and I was like going to networking events, and I worked with really lovely people, would go along to networking events with the legal profession, and I'd just like learn what was expected and all those kind of latent things. And it was as a direct result of that when I was a trainee solicitor, I put myself forward to be BTSS chair. So I was BTSS chair, and did loads of other stuff outside of my training contract, and then from that got those more experience, as well as obviously the really important experiences I had in my training contract as well. And I absolutely would not be about to be Birmingham Law Society president in April, and as I'll only be the 6th woman and a relatively young woman at that, and I just wouldn't have if I hadn't had those other experiences that built up all that confidence and experience.
So as you approach presidency of the Birmingham Law Society, is there any particular goals or aims that you've got in terms of women in law and how to celebrate 100 years of women in law?
Yeah, so I'm really lucky that actually my presidency coincides with 100 years of women being able to practice law. I was also very conscious when I was starting to think about plans for my presidential year that there's some fantastic initiatives that are happening nationally. So the current president of the Law Society of England and Wales has been spearheading a lot of research and been holding focus groups and discussion groups around the country on the theme of women in law. And so I didn't really want to duplicate or replicate any of that for Birmingham, but equally I want to use the opportunity to have that conversation about where we are now and where we might be able to go in the future. So in or around June of this year, we will be having a celebration event, and it will be just that, a celebration event marking the fact that women have been practicing law for 100 years, and we've made great strides. We make a huge contribution to the profession. We have a female president of the Supreme Court now, thankfully joined by other women. She's not there alone. So there's lots to be celebrated, I think, and so we'll be doing that. But I'm also really keen that there are some more tangible things. And so we're exploring, Birmingham Law Society has an Equality and Diversity committee, and so I will be exploring with that committee whether there is any scope for Birmingham Law Society to perhaps offer or facilitate some kind of mentoring scheme, and the details of how that will work are still to be decided. But that idea, going back to some of the things we were talking about earlier, of women having other women that they can turn to for mentoring, for guidance, just to bounce experiences and ideas of how did you ever face this, how did you deal with it, career progression, what are my options, what should and can I be thinking about, so, and perhaps on an inter-firm basis as well. Also, I'm really excited that in my day job I work at the University of Birmingham. I work with some world-leading academics, and some of my colleagues have offered to take part in a piece of research which will look at women who leave the legal profession in Birmingham. So it will be a Birmingham specific study.
Oh, wow, that's so interesting.
And it will look at, hopefully it will bring up some really interesting results that we can feed back to the profession locally. There's a few other bits and bobs as well that still working on and in the pipeline, but those are a couple of things that I'm really excited about for my year.
In a world with no gender influence, would you have chosen a different career?
think if I was a man, I would probably still be a lawyer. But if there were no other barriers on me and I could just do any job whatsoever, I would definitely have been a Blue Peter presenter. So, yeah.
I always wanted a badge.
I got a badge.
Did you actually?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
I was about 4 years old, right, and my big sister, who's 9 years older than me, they did a special edition green Blue Peter badge, which was all about like the environment, and she wrote this amazing poem about the environment and got a green Blue Peter badge, and I was like, I really want one of those. So I wrote a 4-line poem that said, trees are green, mud is brown, sky is blue, grass is green. And I sent it off to Blue Peter, and they sent me a badge, but I was gutted because it was just a normal one. They didn't get that was about the environment, so I just got the normal blue and white Blue Peter badge. Yeah, but it didn't put me off my dream of being a Blue Peter presenter.
So do you have any advice for young women entering the legal profession now?
I would say, regardless of your gender, whatever other characteristics you have, if a career in law is something that's of interest to you, just go for it. We are an open profession. We know that there are still challenges. We know that there are still some things that we need to overcome, and we don't have absolute parity across the board, but great strides are being made. I mean, if you think about it, we've had 100 years of women in law. That's actually a couple of careers ago that women weren't allowed to practice at all, and now we've got more than half of our entrance to our profession are women. So yeah, if you want to go for it, go for it. Don't let anything hold you back. We have a female president of the Supreme Court, like literally the sky is the limit. So
and a female president of Birmingham Law Society.
And that too. Yeah, that too. Same.
Thank you, Linden, for joining us on this special episode of Legally Brum, and to everyone watching, happy International Women's Day.